The accusations started with strange behavior. A few young girls claimed they were being tormented by witches. Fear spread quickly through Salem, Massachusetts. Neighbors accused neighbors. Friends accused friends. Evidence became almost meaningless. Dreams, rumors, and personal grudges were treated as proof. Over the following months, more than 200 people were accused. 19 were executed by hanging. One man was crushed to death under heavy stones after refusing to enter a plea. No witches were ever found. The panic created its own reality. Once suspicion became enough to condemn someone, justice disappeared completely. Leo Frank was convicted of murdering a young girl in Georgia. The trial attracted enormous public attention and controversy. Many believed the evidence against him was weak. When his death sentence was reduced to life imprisonment, public outrage exploded. A group of prominent local citizens took matters into their own hands. They kidnapped Frank from prison and transported him across the state. On August 17, 1915, he was lynched by a mob. Decades later, serious doubts about his guilt remained. Vigilante justice had delivered a permanent sentence before the truth was ever fully known. In parts of Sicily, official justice was often viewed as weak or ineffective. Criminal organizations filled the gap. Disputes were settled through revenge rather than courts. Entire families became targets. Suspected informants disappeared. Personal conflicts escalated into blood feuds lasting decades. During the Second Mafia War alone, more than 1,000 people were killed between the early 1980s and early 1990s. The system claimed to deliver justice. In reality, it created endless cycles of retaliation where violence became self-perpetuating. A stolen pig may have helped start one of America's most famous family feuds. What began as a dispute between two families along the Kentucky-West Virginia border evolved into years of revenge killings. Courts became irrelevant. Family loyalty became law. Ambushes, executions, and retaliatory attacks followed. More than a dozen people died during the conflict. Children grew up expecting violence. Entire communities were forced to take sides. The feud demonstrated how quickly personal justice can transform into generational warfare. As cartel violence spread across parts of Mexico, some communities stopped trusting authorities to protect them. Armed groups formed to identify suspected criminals. But suspicion often replaced evidence. Individuals were detained, beaten, or executed without trials. In regions already destabilized by organized crime, accusations could become death sentences overnight. The desire for security was understandable. The consequences were devastating. Once communities abandon legal standards, mistakes become impossible to reverse. Beginning in 1966, millions of people were accused of being enemies of the revolution. Teachers, intellectuals, officials, and ordinary citizens were publicly humiliated during so-called struggle sessions. Crowds gathered to denounce individuals accused of ideological crimes. Many victims were beaten by neighbors, students, or co-workers. Historians estimate that hundreds of thousands died during the Cultural Revolution, while millions more suffered persecution. Vigilante justice was encouraged by the state itself. Entire communities became both judges and executioners. The attacks began with uniforms. Young Mexican-American men wearing zoot suits became targets of growing hostility in Los Angeles. In June 1943, groups of servicemen and civilians began hunting down individuals they believed represented crime and disorder. Victims were beaten in public streets while crowds watched. Police often arrested the victims instead of the attackers. Hundreds were assaulted over several days. No trials, no evidence, no due process, only assumptions and violence disguised as public protection. Rumors spread faster than facts. A young black man was accused of assaulting a white woman in Tulsa, Oklahoma. Before the legal system could act, armed groups gathered. What followed became one of the worst acts of racial violence in American history. White mobs attacked the prosperous Greenwood district, often called Black Wall Street. More than 35 city blocks were destroyed. Historians estimate up to 300 people were killed. Thousands lost homes and businesses. Vigilante justice became collective punishment on a massive scale. A brutal assault in New York City generated enormous public outrage. Almost immediately, the public demanded punishment. 5 teenagers were arrested and pressured into false confessions. Media coverage portrayed them as guilty before the trial even began. All 5 were convicted. Years later, DNA evidence and a confession from the actual attacker proved their innocence. They had spent years behind bars for a crime they didn't commit. The case demonstrated how public anger can create its own form of vigilante justice, even inside legal systems. Throughout the Cold War, unofficial groups often claimed to be protecting society from criminals, rebels, or political enemies. Death squads emerged across several Latin American countries. Suspects were abducted without warrants. Bodies appeared on roadsides. Families rarely received answers. Thousands were killed across multiple nations. The victims were often labeled dangerous before any evidence was presented. Once accusations replaced trials, entire populations lived under the constant threat of disappearing overnight. During the final years of apartheid, suspected collaborators sometimes faced a horrifying punishment known as necklacing. Victims had tires filled with gasoline placed around their necks before being set on fire. Crowds often witnessed the killings. The practice spread through some communities as a form of vigilante punishment. Hundreds of people are believed to have died this way. The method was intended to create fear. It succeeded, but it also showed how easily resistance movements can adopt the same brutality they oppose. Beginning in 2016, thousands of suspected drug users and dealers were killed during anti-drug operations and vigilante-style attacks. Human rights organizations estimate that the true death toll may be significantly higher than official figures. Many victims never received trials. Some were identified through anonymous accusations. Families often woke up to find relatives dead in the street. Supporters viewed the killings as necessary. Critics viewed them as extrajudicial executions. Either way, guilt was frequently determined without a courtroom. During the Rwandan genocide, ordinary citizens were encouraged to identify, capture, and kill neighbors. Lists circulated. Radio broadcasts named targets. Communities that had lived side by side for decades turned against each other. Over approximately 100 days, around 800,000 people were killed. While political leaders helped organize the violence, much of the killing was carried out by civilians acting as self-appointed enforcers. The result was one of the fastest mass killings in modern history. The Wild West is often remembered as a place where communities created their own justice. The reality was darker. Throughout the 19th century, suspected thieves, murderers, and outlaws were frequently lynched without trials. Some victims may have been guilty. Others almost certainly were not. Accusations could spread in hours. Executions followed shortly afterward. Once a mob decided someone deserved punishment, evidence often stopped mattering. Justice became whatever the crowd believed it should be. In 1981, a town in Missouri reached its breaking point. Ken McElroy had been accused of intimidation, harassment, assault, and numerous other crimes for years. Many residents believed he had escaped accountability repeatedly. One day, dozens of people gathered in broad daylight. McElroy was shot and killed in front of multiple witnesses. Nobody was ever convicted. To many locals, it felt like justice. To others, it was murder. More than 40 years later, the case remains one of the clearest examples of a community deciding that the legal system no longer mattered.